to another edition of the Comic Anthologist. And if you're tuning in for the first time,
hit that subscribe button.
And also, too, if you want to, hit that bell so that way you can not only show your support, but also, if anything, in terms of whatever things that we bring up brand new, and you'll get new notifications of things that are coming in.
And also, too, if you have any questions about what we talk about, or want to refute what we talk about, you could reach us at thecomicanthologist.com.
No, it's at the Comic Anthologist at gmail.com.
Okay, well, thank you for that interjection.
Yeah, just had to throw that in there.
Of course.
But today we're going to talk about Captain Mar-Vell. Now, Captain Mar-Vell, a lot of people have known Captain Mar-Vell from the DC Comics and also Fawcett Comics.
AKA Shazam,
Exactly.
which we already talked about that before. But in this case, we're talking about the Marvel Comics version of Captain Mar-Vell at this point.
Now, at that time, when there was a whole big thing in terms of DC Comics suing Fawcett Comics for the Captain Mar-Vell character because it was too much like Superman, it was considered copyright infringement.
Right.
So in the late 60s, Mar-Vell got the name and was able to trademark it and come up with their own version of Captain Mar-Vell. But Captain Mar-Vell at that time was a Kree soldier who was sent to infiltrate the U.S. military to check on whether or not we were technologically advanced enough to be a threat to the Kree Empire.
Right.
And also, at that time, the KREE-SKRULL War was taking place.
And the Avengers got involved with that too, but that's another story for another time.
Exactly, which is what we'll talk about in terms of the old school story and Operation Galactic Storm. But like I said, that's another story for another time.
I want to interject briefly. Operation Galactic Storm was the bomb.
I know.
It was a bomb.
It was one of those. It was one of the biggest things back in the '90s, and it was basically one of the most enjoyable adventure stories I had ever written. And even the what if.
You mean read? You said written.
That's right. Yeah, read. Any case, yes. I'm sorry. Yes, thank you for that correction. All right. Any case, this version of Captain Mar-Vell we're talking about is the Marvel version. Now, the Captain Mar-Vell that ended up becoming popular before they killed him off during the 70s was, like I said, the Kree soldier. And they went back and changed his whole outfit and everything or whatnot.
And the crazy part is the way he went out. Basically, he got into a fight with a villain named Nitro, which AKA started the Civil War, which the superhero civil war that took place in the early 2000s.
Actually, it was 2007.
Okay, well, late 2000s then. And around that time, when the same villain Nitro basically got into it with Captain Mar-Vell, and basically during the course of the battle, Captain Mar-Vell got exposed to a nerve agent or canister that was a nerve agent that had like carcinogenic properties, which eventually gave his character cancer and killed him off. And that particular, the very first Captain Mar-Vell made his final appearance in the graphic novel known as The Death of Captain Mar-Vell.
There has been 7 iterations of Captain Mar-Vell, but we're going to discuss, we just finished discussing now, the Kree version, and now we're going to go into Carol Danvers. And this is the reason why there's so many iterations of Captain Mar-Vell, and this is just going to be a brief explanation, is that after Mar-Vell had gotten the trademark to keep the name Captain Mar-Vell, the whole deal with that is that every 1 to 2 years they have to publish a new Captain Mar-Vell book in order to keep the trademark name for themselves. Otherwise, it would go back to DC Comics in some form or fashion. So that's the reason why there's so many iterations of a Captain Mar-Vell book over the last almost 40, 50 years now.
Right.
And now, getting into Carol Danvers. Carol Danvers made her first appearance, what was that?
Marvel Superheroes.
Marvel Superheroes number 13.
1968. March of 1968.
Yes, March 1968. And she was basically a secretary to the one that was known as Mar-Vell at the time, but like I said, he was infiltrating the U.S. military to try to figure out what was going on, and also, in some way or form or fashion, to sabotage whatever progress that the U.S. military was making in terms of military might and also the space program. But he had a change of heart and decided to side with the Earth people in terms of fighting for them during the intergalactic war between the Kree and the Skrulls.
But there was one particular fateful issue. I'm not familiar with the issue because it's been a while since I read it, but in the course of that particular issue, Mar-Vell was shielding Carol Danvers from an explosion.
Exactly.
And I believe the explosion was emanating from this thing called the Psych Magnetron.
Yes, and that's the other thing. The energies from that blast ended up, while he was shielding her, basically her DNA and his DNA got fused together. So she ended up with his powers as a result of that, being a human Kree hybrid as a result of that particular explosion.
Right.
And then during the 70s, she became known as Miss Marvel once she came into her own with her own superpowers.
But they did away with Miss Marvel at the time until much, much later. They did away with Miss Marvel when the X-Men the soon-to-be X-Men at the time, she wasn't an X-Men, Rogue, the mutant that had the ability to absorb the powers of any individual or a superpowered or a mutant individual. She could take their powers briefly. In the course of the fight when she had with Miss Marvel, she she grabbed Miss Marvel for too long to the point where it was semi-permanently absorbing her powers.
Right, and that's why Rogue ended up with her powers the way that she stayed. That's why you saw her in the 90s flying around and had super strength or whatnot, because she absorbed that power from Miss Marvel from holding on to her too long. Because, of course, we're not talking about mutants right now, but of course with Rogue's power, the longer you hold on to a person, eventually she could kill that person if she held on to him too long, absorbing too much energy from them. She put Miss Marvel into a coma temporarily for a little while, but once she emerged from that coma, she ended up her powers had shifted and changed, and that's where she ended up becoming Binary.
Yeah, the character known as Binary, which made the appearance in X-Men 164. And in Binary's case, she was an ally of the X-Men and the X-Men's also other allies known as the Starjammers. And what we'll get to towards the end of our podcast, our video cast, is that Carol Danvers' character, she's displaying her name was known as Binary, and for the simple fact that she was utilizing the power of a white star, a white hole, or a white star, or a white hot star. In the trailers that we see,
Binary Star.
Binary Star, right. And so in the trailers that we see her standing like in the cockpit or in some kind of ship or something, in that trailer she's flaring up those same powers that you see like on the cover of X-Men 164.
Yes.
And so when you see that, that's kind of like reminisce, like, okay, now we're seeing this character grow from being from Carol Danvers to Miss Marvel to now Binary. And then at some point she went out into space and broke her ties with the X-Men or whatnot. But eventually she came back to Earth and became an Avenger.
Right.
And so with that being said, her name went from Binary, she changed her name to Warbird.
Right. I remember it was Warbird.
And then ultimately, recently, as of 2011, in issue 9 of Avenging Spider-Man, she made her first appearance as the current Captain Marvel. Which you see now, and which we're going to see in the movies, also in the Marvel Cinematic version of the movie as well.
Now, my question to you is this. What do you think of the trailers that they've been presenting? And also, too, I know they just did The Life of Captain Marvel, which kind of retconned her entire origin.
Right.
So now they made her origin of that of a Kree soldier that was planted on Earth, and she fell in love with an Earthman, and she ended up having a kid. And that kid had no clue what her heritage was.
Okay.
Until later on.
Was that the same kid that basically ran into Mar-Vell on Earth?
Nah, actually, yes and no. But in this limited series, basically it was just established that she now realized that she's half Kree, half human. That's the whole thing. It was all about, that series is more about all about identity.
Okay, gotcha. All right.
And she was trying to figure out who she was and where she came from. But once her mother came in and explained to her, like, oh yeah, this is who you are. Because I come from here, So it kind of did away with the original origin that she had
with Captain Mar-Vell, the original Captain Mar-Vell.
Exactly.
Okay.
So we went by the historical way of how she became Captain Marvel.
Right.
But when they retconned it during the life of Captain Marvel for today's times, that's when it was the change where you find out that she's half Kree, half human.
Okay, and then also too, I've noticed too in the trailer as well, is that they have the Skrulls in there, and the Skrulls are primarily the Fantastic Four villains. Right. Shape-shifting aliens that could take on the shape of a human being on Earth or whatnot.
But they're also Avenger villains as well.
Exactly.
That's one of the reasons why they were able to use.
And they're also mortal. And the Skrull race is also mortal enemies
with
the Kree. Yes.
Yes. And with having said that, that's the reason why I mentioned that the KREE-SKRULL War took place back in the late 60s, early 70s. Mm-hmm. And then you saw another iteration of it in Operation Galactic Storm when the Avengers got involved.
Yeah, but it was like the Kree, the Skrulls, and the Shi'ar Empire, which the Shi'ar Empires are also X-Men. Allies and sometimes enemies of the X-Men.
Right. So that was one of those things that it was a three-way war going on.
And the Avengers got caught in the middle.
In the middle, just to protect Earth from being destroyed between the crossfire and the friendly fire between those three races.
Well, because the thing was they were using the sun as a means of teleporting or transporting I forgot if it was the Kree or the Shi'ar Empire was using the teleporters, and it was drawing energy from the sun, and if they drew too much of it off, it would have gone supernova and destroyed the Earth.
Oh yeah, it was basically we're using.
And the Avengers basically were caught in the middle of trying to get them to stop the fighting, stop the teleporting or whatever, because you're going to destroy the Earth.
Exactly, because you destroy the sun and basically use up all the fuel out of the sun, using whatever means necessary to transport whatever things that they had to transport, but speed up the life of it instead of the sun going nova or becoming a red giant 6.5 billion years from now into today's times.
Right.
So, you have any questions about the trailer?
I just look forward to seeing the movie when it first comes out.
Well, you now know that it's now on par with Black Panther and Avengers Endgame. Not Avengers Endgame, Avengers Infinity War in terms of ticket sales. It is now number 3 behind Black Panther.
What I'm curious about is now I want to see how this plays out on the screen, how Captain Marvel will go toe-to-toe, if she will go toe-to-toe with Thanos, or there'll be like a team effort to take down Thanos in Avengers Endgame.
Well, here's another thing that they had also talked about too, was that she has the power of time travel. She can.
Oh, see, well, I didn't know about that part.
Yeah, there's a thing about her having the ability to travel through time. So if she could travel through time, that could be something of a
MacGuffin or something.
Basically, that could stop Thanos if they can stop him if she could stop him that.
Kind of like what they did in Avengers. Into the Spider-Verse, a goober.
Yes. yes.
The goober, the MacGuffin.
yes. So that's one of those things that they explained recently, just from the blogs that I've been reading about. So that's what I'm looking forward to seeing how they're going to play this out. But in terms of the numbers, it's on par with the other two, since it has a direct tie with Avengers Infinity War. At the end of the movie, if anybody hasn't seen it by now, you've been living under a rock, or you've been hiding, or you just haven't paid attention. But just wanted to say was that at the end of the movie, check it out.
At the end credits, the very, very end.
And I'm talking about the end. You'll see what I'm talking about and see what was going on with Nick Fury.
Spoilers, but not spoilers.
Exactly. So, in any case, this is another edition of the Comic Anthologist. If you have any questions or any comments or anything that's related to this material,
email us at thecomicanthologist@gmail.com.
Yes. Okay. And hit that bell for any notices or any new things that come up. And until then, take it easy. Peace.